Florida, like was in Miami and came back from Miami like a couple of weeks before he started cutting hair. And while he was cutting Nisha's hair, he was telling him that like people were just acting like fools in Miami, that like probably only like 1 out of every 5 or like 1 out of every 10 people he saw out on the street were wearing a mask, and like they were acting like nothing was happening.
That's ridiculous. Like,
and that's why they're having that's why they're having problems that we're not having at this moment in time. Like, I think the worry here is much more that people are going to be, that somebody's going to come in from one of these other states and start it going again, because it's like I understand the there's the quarantine that they put for people coming in from Florida and Texas and whatnot, but how are they going to enforce that?
Yeah, when people drive in, there are no borders between the states for people to be able to do that.
And
no, it's totally enforceable. Rhode Island was doing it in any car with New York plates when they quarantined traffic from our state. So it's enforceable.
Or they could take the people that are currently doing border patrol, like watching out for Mexicans, and just like put them on the borders. I
don't think anyone in New York is watching out for Mexicans. They might be watching out for Canadians, but
yeah, well, they could just take, they could just take all of the people off of the borders and reallocate them to interstate borders and just pull people over and see.
Even so, like I've been in situations on the expressway, like going over a state border, where the state troopers of one or the other state seem to be like hanging around the border as is, and this was pre-COVID. So you've always got, like, say for example, like the state police hanging out at the border with Pennsylvania, or like the toll takers and the toll booths on the George Washington Bridge and stuff.
What are we talking about? Enforcing restrictions on interstate
out-of-state
travel?
people coming in, yeah.
People like from Florida and Texas coming into New York when they have much worse COVID than we do at this particular shot in time. And I was saying that my fear is not so much that like New Yorkers, like the few people that are catching it in New York now, are going to infect tons of people, because up to now, from what I've seen, like most of the upticks in cases, they've been able to contact trace successfully and like trace them back to like all being clustered in like some factory or something, or to a prison or a nursing home or something. But my fear is much more like people coming in like from Florida and not self-quarantining because of the quarantine being hard to enforce. Because it's like, how can you really monitor, like, if people are, I mean, yes, like, Joey, you're right, like, they could say, like, you know, they could pull over cars with, like, out-of-state license plates, but it's like, how are you going to watch all those people and make sure they stay inside every second of every day for 14 days, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you can't unless you forced everyone to wear an ankle monitor, and that would be, you know, unconstitutional and totalitarian. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily even want that. I mean, I even have a problem with the police enforcing social distancing, frankly, because it's just given the cops another excuse to harass people. I mean,
harass people of color too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we you know, as a society, I really don't want us to go too far in the direction of trading liberty for security. I mean, we've already went that direction after 9/11, and now the NSA basically reads everything. We don't have any privacy as a result. So as much as I was all for suspending commerce, and I can't stand those idiots that wanted to reopen early, but at the same time, I don't want to create a police state for the sake of fighting COVID. I mean, we basically, I mean, I guess this is where my sort of civil libertarian comes out, that it's acceptable to, accept a certain amount of risk for the sake of liberty.
Yep, I agree.
No, I totally see what you're saying. Like, I like, under no means, like, want to even have, like, say what they're doing in, like, China and South Korea and some other countries where they're forcing everybody to download a contact tracing app, and, like, it's prohibiting people from they're making them pay. There's some city in China, I don't remember which one, but they're making people download a contact tracing app and then making it so you can so that contact tracing app is, like, attached to an app to pay your subway fare, and it won't let you swipe into the subway if your app says you've been around somebody with COVID in the last 14 days. And I think that's pushing it. I don't agree with, like, that's, like, the contact tracing apps are kind of, like, to me, almost equivalent to putting a house arrest monitor on somebody.
Yeah, I agree.
I think what's just annoying is that, like, it's annoying for people who do follow the rules to be held back by the dumbasses who don't. Like, I feel like with the whole COVID situation, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of over it. Like, I feel I'm to the point now where I feel like I'm getting punished for the people who can't follow directions. Like, I'm like the kid that's, like, always behaves in school and then like loses my recess anyway because 2 or 3 kids in the class can't behave.
With the interstate travel, I mean, you were just talking about basically turning people back around and, like, not allowing people into the state. Is that what we were going for, or you were just, like, talking about it in general?
Well, I think in Rhode Island, like, what they did when they were trying to prohibit us for a while, like, I think in Rhode Island they didn't stop people with New York license plates and tell them to, like, turn away, but they stopped them and informed them that they were required to self-quarantine for 2 weeks, and then let them make the decision, like, if they were willing to do that or if they should just turn around and go home. But then there's always going to be, like, the asshole who slips through the cracks who picks option 3. Neither.
Right.
But I feel like, I don't know, like, New Yorkers are known for being assholes, like, in general, but I feel like people here in general have been a lot less asshole-ish about.
Well, there's a certain amount of responsibility and sophistication that comes with living in such a high population density.
Yeah, New Yorkers are not assholes. That's just the perception. Everyone else.
Like, I think that, like, it's, like, I feel like that, like, people here have no problem, like, following the rules for the benefit of the greater good, but some of the stories I'm hearing coming out of places like Florida or Texas or Arizona, it's like, Florida especially, like, no one gives a flying you know what, like, they just want to go to the beach and party.
Yeah, it's a problem.
I mean, I've seen some I've seen some behavior here that's concerning. Also, like I took a walk into downtown the other day and I saw this huge group of people congregating outside a pizza place. None of them were wearing masks, and they were gathered in a large group. So I think there is some pretty lousy behavior in New York. Also, I guess you were talking about the city specifically. Although I've
Well,
seen,
no, there's lousy behavior in New York. Like, it's not only the city. Like, my mom has been complaining too about like her Trump-loving neighbors who thought the whole thing was a hoax from day one. But
What, in the Utica area?
yeah, but like I think that I don't know, like what, like I was saying this, Joey, before you came on, that like I noticed, you know, at least when I walk around where I'm at, I feel like the majority of people are wearing masks. Like I would be willing to bet that like in my neighborhood there's like, while walking outside there's pretty good mask compliance, and there I haven't seen anyone be a Karen about having to wear a mask in the store. Like when I was in Target, I saw 100% mask compliance basically.
Good.
I didn't see anyone without a mask, and nobody was giving the staff a hard time. But whereas I'm reading all of these stories like in other states of people refusing, of like less than half of the population wearing masks on a regular basis, like masks not being required in stores, people like Karen's temper tantruming about having to wear a mask, crazy people like spreading rumors that wearing a mask is all like, you know, a deep state means of population control because it's intended to restrict their breathing. Like
Yeah,
I've seen all.
I'm gonna assume with the degrees of separation here and how many people folks know that people have personally been affected here, like, you know, either neighbors or friends or family members have personally been affected, and probably, you know, a number of people. So I think people probably don't have the luxury in New York City of just pretending like it's not real.
Pretending that it's not here.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's true, because even like in my case, like I could, like, speaking for myself, I I've been fortunate not to lose anybody really really close to me.
Yeah.
But like I've had students, like I have students who lost family members to COVID. Like there were like old people in my church who died of COVID. Like there were, like our neighbor told us that her brother passed from COVID. So like I feel like you're right that like everybody, even if it's not somebody really close to them, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody that had it.
Yeah. Like I have 4 family members who had it. You know, all of them ended up safe, but that's 4 folks in my family. One of them in my immediate family. The other ones, you know, 2 uncles and an aunt. And then right across from me, in my apartment building, we had 2 people pass away from it. And there's only 2 apartments on this whole floor, and we're the other one. So there's, you know, just one other apartment on the floor, and they had 2 people pass away within like less than a month of each other.
Wow, did you know them?
I didn't, but I used to see one of them like being carried up and down the stairs in like a wheelchair, and it took me a little while to put 2 and 2 together, because I heard the you know, the grandmother, when she passed away, I heard the EMTs like working on her, trying to resuscitate her for like, I think like 18 minutes or something, before they called it, and there was a girl out there, a younger girl who was telling them about the grandfather who had passed away, and it took me like a while to remember like who that was, like the person I used to see like going up and down the stairs in the wheelchair.
Right. Wow. That's
And
a tough thing to hear.
and I mean like look, I'm like 99% sure that I had it, but
Same.
I was just lucky for it not to manifest itself as any more than a sinus infection where I couldn't smell and taste a darn thing.
Yeah, my sister had something similar, and then like I said before, I was telling her to like go get tested right away, but she was saying
Well,
that
I
they were.
couldn't because at the time when I had it, like I had it right back in March, and they weren't testing anyone if you weren't going to the hospital.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't. They kept telling her, they kept just discouraging her from getting tested until she finally like told us, like, look, I ended up going to the hospital and they told me that I definitely had it. So they were, I guess discouraging people unless they were showing bad enough signs to actually be in the hospital.
Yeah, which doesn't make much sense because if they're for them to only have been testing people who were in the hospital, because if they're in the hospital, they're not going to be outside spreading it to other people.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess at that point, maybe the capacity was just like, I don't know, maybe they didn't have a lot of capacity to deal with it or something.
Well, no, they didn't. But I feel like that, like, oddly enough, like, contrary to what it seems like, I would almost argue that it would make more sense to test, like, mildly symptomatic people, at least, than, like, people in the hospital, because the mildly symptomatic people are still the people who were like, oh, I just have a cold, I can move on with my life.
Yeah, no, I mean, they definitely should have been testing everyone for sure.
I mean, in the beginning, they just didn't have the availability of the tests. I don't think it was because they didn't want to test everybody.
No, I mean, I don't think it's because they didn't want to, but I just think, like, that it's not as useful information to have to test people who are already in the hospital because they're not going to be moving around giving it to other people.
Yeah.
That's a good point, yeah.
Like, if they're in the hospital, they're not seeing anyone but the nurses and doctors who have PPE anyways, or were supposed to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, it's so much easier to get tested now.
Yeah.
But I think to be honest, I think that's a large part of why it's not spreading here the way it is in other states, is because we're actually testing like the closer to the amount of people we're supposed to be, and people are actually staying the hell home if they do get test positive.
Mm-hmm. Are you eating ice cream?
Yeah.
That's good.
Peach cobbler ice cream.
Oh my
Nice.
god. Stop.
Sounds good.
But like, because honestly, I feel like that, like, in my case, even like I'm lucky that like I had it early and had it like at a time when everybody was too scared to leave their house, and I really didn't leave my house for 2 weeks anyways. But like, I feel like that I would have been one of those people who would have still tried to go about my business if there was business to go to.
Yeah.
just because I didn't feel that sick, you know?
Uh-huh.
And at that point, we had no idea how serious it was yet. So there was still some excuse when you thought you just had a cold. It's what's really insane now, you know, like you said, is the people who are aware of what it is and yet still leave the house without a mask as if there's as if we aren't in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, it's just really insane narcissistic behavior.
Well,
Yeah, there are people demanding to go into the stores without a mask.
Yeah, and acting like that's some horrible form of tyranny, just observing basic public health regulations during a pandemic. I mean, give me a break. People are just sociopathic.
well, and it doesn't help. Like 45 does not help the situation.
Not at all. And I think everybody who's like trying to go against whatever guidelines you're put in place, they make everything so political. Like, oh, this is a conspiracy to try to like oppress us. And they want to turn us into like
Or
they
it's a
want us all
conspiracy.
hijabs. This is the path that they're taking us. I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up. That's not what's happening.
Well, that's the problem. Is everything's been politicized, and I think only in a society that's very that is very susceptible to manipulation can we be in this situation in the first place, right? Like in no reasonably educated society would you have a Donald Trump at the head
But we
of the.
don't have a
like
reasonably
that.
educated society.
Well, that's my point. That's my point. Is that the same kind of society that would allow us to have a Donald Trump is the kind of society that would try to politicize wearing a mask. Though it's interesting that they had the anti-mask society back in the in the 10s and 20s or what have you
During the
Spanish flu. Yeah, so it's like the same thing all over again.
I just kind of wish everyone who refuses for the greater good, just listen and put on your mask. I just wish that they would contract COVID and hopefully it puts them out. Maybe they'll take it more seriously. Like, what is it going to take for you to understand how serious this is? People are dying out there.
Well, no, I mean, they're more likely to spread it to someone else, you know. Unfortunately.
Not if they get a really bad case and they can't even, like, get out of bed.
Yeah, well, by then they've already spread it to a bunch of people.
That's true.
Thinking about Donald Trump, I don't think Donald Trump is a phenomenon that's unique to America, at least not in this particular time. I mean, look at what? Brazil, exactly. France, I mean, the National Front is the second largest party. I mean, we've seen a rise in far-right xenophobic ideologies in, supposedly educated, enlightened Europe. So I don't think America is necessarily so much worse than the rest of the world right now. I mean, maybe Trump in his particular style is a distinctly American phenomenon, but the problem isn't so much, I have a problem with people who dislike Trump just because they think he's uncouth, because it shows me that they don't necessarily object to what he says. It's how he says it, because there's other people who are just as racist, just as awful as Trump throughout the world, yet express it more articulately and morally they're just as bad.
But the thing is, like, those leaders that are in other countries, they don't affect the lives of people in this country.
Well, I care about human beings everywhere, not just in America, and I'm just saying this in relation to people thinking that only in America would we have a Donald Trump. I don't buy that. And also, you shouldn't only care about Americans. You should care about all human beings.
Yeah, I feel like it's a symptom of ignorance and a lack of education, but um, that's not only America. It's not, it doesn't single out America.
That's an
Um,
everybody problem.
yeah, I mean, I feel like it, Donald Trump definitely kind of like kicked things off in a fashion that was like a lot of fanfare, but then all the other dominoes like fell pretty quickly, and that we saw like the same thing happening in other countries pretty
But I
quickly.
mean,
But
what do you feel like that the driving factors are behind like the general global push to the right?
that's a good question. I mean, part of it is they probably, I mean, I think they have a global strategy. Um, folks that are like the 0.1%, I think have a global strategy. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, these things like tend to come in waves, but
Because I feel like in the U.S., Trump's election was a backlash to Obama. Like Trump's election was a signal of white fragility, honestly.
yeah, but they've been pushing these really dumb, charismatic leaders for a long time. Like, I mean, we had Bush, but then like after Bush, they got worse and worse. There were like the Sarah Palins and like all of these like Ben Carson like candidates, like people who, in addition to being horrible policy wise, they actually didn't know what they were doing, right? Like these
Actually,
people,
also morons.
yeah, which is can kind of be worse because it's like the 0.1% pulling the strings behind are able to have that much more control if like you have someone who doesn't know how things are supposed to go. Joey, do you have any insight onto like the global phenomenon that we're seeing with these type of leaders like all coming in like this?
Yeah, actually, thanks. Sorry, did you want to say something?
Sam, are you saying? Sam, are you trying to leave?
Yeah, no, I gotta go. The recording is breaking up, and I have to go help my mom out. But hopefully, you can. I'd love to participate again soon and have more to say. So,
All
right, bye.
Okay. All right. See you later.
Okay. Well, to answer your question, Flav, I think that beginning in the 90s, there was this trend towards financialization in the U.S. and Europe, and there was this trend of the Labor Party, the Democratic Party here, the SDP in Germany, all sort of moving to the center in an attempt to chase corporate money and abandon labor. And there were free trade deals, which completely impoverished a lot of areas and destroyed labor power. And part of the result of that was it destroyed class solidarity. It destroyed people voting in the interests of their class. And I feel that the end result of that, because it's only accelerated after like in the 2008-2009 recession, when there was austerity implemented everywhere. And I think that the right-wing nationalists came in and filled a void and appealed both to people's racism and bigotry and to their legitimate resentment at having their livelihood destroyed because the parties that they used to vote for, the socially democratic parties, had completely abandoned them. And I think that we have to recognize that neoliberalism has been disastrous to the world, and that if we care about racism, we should want a society that is equitable, where everyone has a chance to have a decent standard of living, because the end result of not making sure of not having that is people just voting purely on their cultural and racial resentment, and that gets us fascism, and that kills people. So
you're saying basically that you feel like that, like, the corporatocracy that the world has right now, that's kind of like pushed by the major parties, has kind of given people like the sense of resentment where they're not really blaming the 1% the way they should. They're just blaming each other and kind of harnessing that, like, to vote against like the other, per se.
Yeah, in a manner of speaking, I think I think that because because well, I mean, I think some people do blame the 1%, but it's sort of been twisted, and legitimate resentment against the rich has been weaponized into a resentment against immigrants as well. And obviously, racism has always been a serious problem in the U.S. and Europe. But if we could get it down to a level where it was not what a majority of people were voting on necessarily, it would be a lot better. And that's what it used to be when there was class solidarity. And I also think this is complicated because every country isn't the same. Like, I have seen polling that's actually shown that in terms of support for immigrants, Americans have actually always been a lot more liberal than Europeans, even in spite of Trump. So, I mean, that especially goes to show me that here there's something else going on. I mean, Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. He destroyed unions, completely impoverished large swaths of the country. And at the time, Democrats said to labor unions, look, you have nowhere to go. And then Obama was elected president in 2008 with, promising card check, and the unions got out the vote for him. And then as president, he did nothing to support that, and he pushed for the TPP. And, that I think that because Trump was able to weaponize those issues, and he was running against Hillary Clinton, who had once promoted the TPP. Yeah, I think that was at least as much a part of what was going on there as racism, because it's undoubtable that racism was a huge driver in support for him and his hardline stance on immigration, but that was not the only thing that was going on.
I think it was also people just basically voting for him because they wanted to give a middle finger to the establishment, ostensibly.
Well, yeah, exactly. That,
fuck you didn't do anything for me.
Exactly, yeah.
So a question about the austerity you were talking about, and then you kind of linked something back to Clinton as far as like NAFTA was like. Well, first of all, was like NAFTA the first of those trade agreements that passed? Was like our pushing of NAFTA like the first real push of these kind of free trade agreements?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay,
yeah, to my knowledge, that sounds right.
Okay, so that kind of puts a lot of the root problems back on the U.S. again. But as far as the austerity, you talked about austerity from like 2008 to 2009. Were those the years that you quoted?
I don't remember off the top of my head the exact years, but it was in between 2008 and I think the early 2010s.
And was that did that all come out of like the recession that we had like a little bit earlier, or were these just like things that were happening globally?
This was actually more in Europe than the U.S. It was austerity was far more severe in Europe, and it was sort of imposed undemocratically by the EU, and countries like Greece had like 20% employment. People were starving all throughout Eastern Europe, and so that's where a lot of the resentment at the EU comes from, and unfortunately, the right-wing nationalist parties were able to come in and weaponize that because there was no left to speak of that was standing against austerity.
Right.
Well, I think too, like what I notice is that because of all of these economic issues, like there seems to be a major like competition between different quote unquote, there seems to be a rise in identity politics because everybody seems to think that like the group that they're not a part of is stealing their jobs, because with austerity there's just not enough jobs to go around. So like poor black people think white people are stealing their jobs. Poor white people think all the black people and the Mexicans are stealing their jobs. Like people are saying, oh, he only got hired because he's gay and they wanted a gay person in the department. Like insert identity politics
Exactly,
here,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's another function of the way capitalism works, you know, by its nature, by dividing and conquering the working class and giving them nothing to unify around.
Yeah, that divide and conquer has worked well for a long time. You know, I mean, ever since you know, in this country, at least since slaves were brought to this country, there was a sense of divide and conquer. Certainly between you know, like poor whites and slaves or ex-slaves who kind of like realized they had the same, you know, kind of like the same enemy. They started pitting folks against each other pretty early on with its desired outcome, which is I guess has to be the strategy, because there's always way more poor folks than a few folks at the top, you know.
Exactly.
But and I think like, and it's one of those things where it's like things are so broken that I don't even know what to fix first. Like I've talked to people who thought racism was a worse problem than classism. I've talked to people who thought classism was a worse problem than racism. And to me, I just feel like the intersection of the two is the worst problem of all.
I mean, I think in terms of how to fix things, those are very I mean, those like I mean those are very sort of vague categories when it comes to policy and solving racism. Obviously, we want to, you know, fight to legislate against institutional racism, like obviously defund the police and mass incarceration. And as far as inequality, I think that, and this is one of the biggest reasons I supported Bernie, because I think that inequality and climate change are two of the biggest threats we face. And I think a Green New Deal would have, with a jobs guarantee, would have done a great deal to stop both of them. And it would have put us on the road to actually meeting the targets that we're supposed to meet within the next 10 years. So that would have been my first priority. And then I would say we also need to enact a universal healthcare system so that people just don't die anymore for lack of treatment. And ending mass incarceration to solve institutional racism are about tied in my book. But climate change is really an existential threat, and climate change and inequality are going to continue to be two forces which enable fascism. I mean, look at how, and this is another factor we didn't really talk about, how in Europe there was the refugee crisis, which was partly a result of climate change in 10, 15 years, that refugee crisis is going to be far worse. And look at how bad it is already. I mean, I just worry that we're on the road to something even more horrifying, like some sort of Fourth Reich or something, now that racism has slowly begun to be normalized. So I had all that in mind when I voted for Bernie, and it's why I've been so completely disheartened when he lost, because I feel like we're still stuck in this awful neoliberal paradigm.
Well, on the flip side, though, like, I find that, like, and I'm going to preface this by saying that at least this time around, I did vote for Bernie in the primary, even though it was technically after he had suspended his campaign. But I did vote for him for the purpose of getting him more delegates, but to kind of move the platform. But I noticed, I felt like in 2016, like that the biggest mistake that Bernie made was not addressing issues of race as much as he could have in his campaign. Like, that I feel like that, like, a lot of that he spoke of, like, the rhetoric of, like, the 1% and the 99% and the Wall Street bankers and et cetera,
Right.
all the time. But I feel like that, like, a lot of people, say, for example, a lot of people in the Black community were actually kind of turned off by that because they kind of felt like, well, putting regulations on Wall Street doesn't affect my life, but the fact that my kid just got shot by a rogue cop, does affect my life. So it seemed like that, like, I feel like that, like, where Bernie could have done better in 2016 is to have listened to more of, like, the stories from, say, like, the mothers of, like, Eric Garner or Trayvon Martin or any of the people or any of the young Black men who have been killed due to racism, because I feel like a lot of the Black community tended to go more with Hillary because they felt like she was more receptive to their concerns in that front, rather than, and like that Bernie was just like talking about things that were kind of out of sight, out of mind for them in their daily lives, if that makes any sense.
I got a couple things to say about that. First, I want to put forth the question, do you think that was a strategy of his, was to not talk about race too much, and to
I don't think it was an explicit strategy necessarily, but if it was a mistake, in my opinion.
Right. So I mean, I wonder if he didn't want to lose, too many folks in the center, or like too many white folks, so he didn't center on race too much. That's one question I had. And then
But
the
to
other,
me, I feel like, are there really, like, for lack of a better term, like, to be blunt about it, are there really white racists who would have voted for him in the first place?
well, if those people don't, it's not that simple. It's not that cut and dry. It really isn't.
Because I feel like I don't know too many people who are racist on the left.
Well,
no, there's plenty.
Well, first of all, yeah, that's totally ridiculous.
I mean, maybe it's a function of who I know, though.
I mean, yeah, that's just totally ridiculous in general. But not just the left, but the center, that's needed to get that many votes, right? Like, because we're talking about someone who does, like, you can't just like be on the fringe and win, otherwise a Dennis Kucinich or a Ralph Nader like would have won a long time ago. So not even saying that it's right. I'm just wondering if that was his strategy. Um, but I mean, I definitely do agree with you that there's this whole like white guy classism trumps everything, even if that's not what they really mean. It's just the way that it sounds. And like I always made the joke, like, you know, what do you say to a mother whose child has just, you know, been shot by the cops, and like a Bernie or a DSA guy is going to say, take money out of politics, right? And it's like, I actually had these conversations with like some very smart people, and it took them a little bit to like come around and understand. And they're like, no, if you take money out of politics, you're going to solve everything, you know? And it's like, that's just not, A, that's not the way it works. And B, you know, your message is not going to get through that way. Like getting back to Hillary, I mean, I think the thing with Hillary, I don't know if Hillary just presented herself as some person who a bunch of black people thought had a
If you
great
ask me, they
stance on.
both fucked up their campaigns, but
Okay, but anyways, letting me. Well, yeah, for sure, they definitely did.
that's another problem for another day, though.
But getting back to the Hillary thing is like, I don't know that she was seen as this person with this great like racial analysis or racial stance. But I mean, like I always say, she had deep rooted relationships in the community, and you know, for lack of a better word, like folks would rather go with the devil that you know than the one that you don't.
So it goes back to the same explanation for like why they're supporting Biden now.
Well, yeah, I mean they've known these folks for years and years and years. Clinton they knew for years and years, and then you know, like both Hillary and Bill, and these people actually did a good job, like going into the community and setting up all these programs and like helping people like graduate and do business and you know going to the churches and all of this stuff, and people actually know them, so like we can like sit around and like you know have this witty banter about like who's better for like black folks or this and that, or like who's going to get like more jobs, or like universal health care is going to affect who. But at the end of the day, as like people are like, no, show me like what you can do for me, and like let me get to know you, you know. And if you don't know someone, it's going to be hard to like cast your hard-earned vote for them.
And
that
I
vote,
mean, like, I guess like here's what I'm getting at, where I find it hard to believe that it was a strategy for Bernie to avoid talking about race, because I just feel like that in general, like he wasn't, like from day one, he's never really tried to court people from the center, at least like openly. Like I just feel like he's always kind of like
he's let it
written
slip.
off centrists at a lost cause.
No, he's let it slip before. It's one of the quotes that he got in trouble for. He basically said that people who didn't vote for Obama because he was black weren't necessarily racist. And then he said something else. And he was trying to get to a point that I think was important, but in this you know,
Climate?
media clip, like 5-second blip atmosphere, it's hard for people to hear that stuff. Like I knew black people that had written him off like earlier, and I would be upset with them, but he did have a few instances that were kind of like flubs. Like they asked him about reparations. I'm like, look, these are issues that now people care about, and now that people are pushing, and certainly folks on the left. If if you're not for it, or if you don't believe in it, you don't have to lie about it or whatever. But I think Bernie probably was for it. He just didn't know how to be like honest without being too honest. So his answer was
he
like,
kind of suffered from foot and mouth disease, basically.
yeah, they asked him about reparations, and he was like, well, what do you mean by reparations? And like he kind of died on that hill rather than saying yes and, right? He should have been like, yes, I believe in reparations, this is what it means, blah, 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 and we should also do this. But instead, he just kind of like was like, well, what do you mean by reparations, right? Which is like, I understand you don't want to be like put in a box, and you don't want like some media person to like manipulate your words and put you in a corner, but that stuff didn't play well to the news. Made them look bad.
Something.
Cynthia, wait, Cynthia, you haven't
kind
said anything in a while. Do you have any opinions on this stuff?
I haven't been listening 100% because I'm on Reddit. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
So I have nothing to contribute. And also, politics is such a deep subject. No, I have nothing to contribute.
So is a well is a very deep subject too.
Hmm?
A well is a very deep subject too. But I feel like I'm kind of interested, like, in hearing you guys like elaborate more on.
Yeah, Joey, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think that Bernie like kind of like evaded the race issue some, or do you think that he doesn't get enough credit for like what he brought to the table on race?
No, I think there are totally valid criticisms of him on that point, and I think activists need to push him like they do.
He did much better this time around.
I agree. Yeah, he needs to be pushed by activists just like any politician. My one caveat, though, is that I will say I just find it really disingenuous when that criticism comes from mainstream liberals who will then make excuses for people like Hillary and Biden, who have supported policies monumentally worse than anything Bernie ever has. I mean, Bernie is again, he's imperfect because he voted for the 92-94 crime bill, but he never gave the super predator speech, which was blatantly racist, dog whistling, and Hillary's entire campaign in 2008, her campaign against Obama in the primary was proto-Trumpism. I mean, she said at one point that she was the candidate of hardworking white Americans. So I think Bernie should be.
She actually said that?
Yeah, she did at one point. That's an actual quote. So
Bill got in on some bullshit too.
Yeah,
Bill was saying that people were just voting for Obama because he was black. You know?
Yeah, exactly. He said, yeah, Jesse Jackson won South Carolina too, just to try to dismiss it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Bernie shouldn't say those things, and he should do a better job. And I'm glad that he did a better job this time. But when you think about the media is always going to be harder on him and hold him to a higher standard than any other Democrat. And I just think that was the most cynical thing Hillary did in 2016, was try to pretend that she was somehow more woke than Bernie. I mean, the woman who spent her entire life racist dog whistling, who campaigned for Barry Goldwater in 1964 when Bernie was getting arrested for protesting civil rights. I mean, it was just really disingenuous to come from her, but it was not disingenuous when it came from Black Lives Matter activists. I fully supported them going after Bernie on it.
Yeah, well, he kind of had a good turnaround after that.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of like came up with like more policy, and so that stuff was good. The other thing I wonder about was like the whole like, instead of him saying, I have a plan and this is how we're going to pay for it, it was always like, I'll tell you. And then it was like all the way at the end that he finally told us. I'm like, didn't he have access to this stuff? Like, couldn't he have just simplified it and said, look, like the long and short of it is we're going to make corporations pay their fair share, and that's going to be way more than enough to pay for this stuff. That's my plan. And people would have been like, okay, like, hell yeah. Like, okay, I understand
like,
that.
Also what I'm trying to get at, and like because I'm kind of curious to delve a little bit more into like what you mean by like that, for lack of a better term, that racists might have still voted for Bernie.
those were your words. They weren't mine. So okay, let me try to break this down without contradicting myself. So you got a bunch of people in the middle, right? They're like moderate. They're like what MLK called like moderate liberals. They don't consider themselves racist, and you know, I mean, if we break it down, like everyone's racist. So in that sense, everyone is. So that's that. But getting away from that, like these are people who maybe may not be comfortable saying, yeah, we're gonna pay reparations and we're gonna pay Black people every dime that they're owed, plus, plus give them the option of like free schools, super low interest loans, or even like free small business loans, and all this other stuff to reverse redlining. Like, yeah, we're actually going to pay them a check first, and it's going to be worth trillions of dollars, and it's going to be like not just the actual money that their ancestors weren't paid in today's dollars, but it's also going to take into effect that a lot of that could have gone into generational wealth and would have actually accumulated dollars on top. So we're going to pay them like a substantial amount that we think is actually going to help. But on top of that, we're gonna address all these other things that we're talking about, whether it's like healthcare, whether it's
But here's the
ownership
thing,
of businesses.
is that like in my experience, like, and again, like it could be about like who I've spoken with and who I know and what have you, but I feel like the general anti-corporate stuff would have stopped people from voting for him before any issues of race would have, if that makes any sense.
No, because there's a lot of people who are like, it's easy to like hate on like Amazon that's like worth billions upon billions and isn't paying taxes, but maybe you're hardworking, I don't know, you're a hardworking father who's I don't know, like who's gonna have to like maybe chip in a little bit more to pay for mistakes of the past or something. It's just different. Like people are like, this isn't like cut and dry. Like, hey, I'm a racist.
It's like you think
no,
some
it's not.
people would be okay with paying taxes for healthcare, but not for reparations.
Yeah, even really like the way that the healthcare thing is supposed to go. People, it should really only be people with a lot of money that are kicking in extra for healthcare. If you really look at the way the system between the haves and the have-nots, like if you just like tax speculation 1/10 of 1%, we should be able to pay for healthcare. And if we taxed at 0.2, we should be able to pay for healthcare and transportation. If you tax at 0.3, like you add education to that, and this isn't even a 1% tax. So like we're talking about like when you really scale it out, no one should really be afraid of paying more money, unless the corporations have like that much control where they're barely going to chip in more than they should.
And something else I want to interject, because Emily, I think you said you thought that people would be more scared off by Bernie's corporate rhetoric than his support for reparations. I don't necessarily think that's a very representative group. I know this is not entirely related to the subject we're talking about at the moment, but it's something I thought of because you said that. Most polling I saw this primary season showed that an overwhelming majority of Democratic primary voters agreed with Bernie's proposals, like something like 70 to 80% supported Medicare for all, but many of those voters genuinely believed, and they believed this, I think, in large part because they'd been told it by MSNBC for months on end, that Biden was the most electable. So they voted for Biden in the primary. Basically, they didn't vote against Bernie because they disagreed with his policies, but because they felt like they had to vote for someone they disagreed with for someone else's sake. So this is what just drives me nuts about Democrats, is how preemptively defeatist they are. I'm sorry, that's kind of an aside, but I thought it was kind of related to what you were talking about.
But I guess like kind of what I'm getting at is that like I'm trying to I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm trying to
No, not at all.
But I'm trying to understand, like, you know, because in my experience, most of the rich limousine liberals who are anti-corporate reform tend to overlap with the not in my backyard, like, black people are okay, but not living in my neighborhood types.
No, I think you're totally right on that, and I think they do. I'm just saying that group is not necessarily representative of all Democratic primary voters. But I'm sorry, I realized I was changing the subject kind of, because I totally agree with you on that point. I think I think that I think that a lot of them, are NIMBYs. They don't want to pay higher property taxes so that kids, one district over can go to better schools. They and so it really doesn't matter whether they're personally racist or not, because they're supporting institutionally racist policies. So yeah, I think you're totally on.
I think my point was that I feel that like Bernie shouldn't have, and again, he realized this and he corrected himself, but I feel like that like Bernie shouldn't have been, if in fact that was the case of what was going of his strategy, he shouldn't have been so scared of what the NIMBYs would think, because honestly, like a lot of the NIMBYs would tend to overlap with corporatists who were scared off anyways. Like it's kind of like trying to convince a Trump voter not to vote for Trump. Like they're going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was never a base that was going to support Bernie. Most people like that supported Pete Buttigieg or Warren or even Bloomberg.
That racist piece of shit.
Totally, yeah, that complete asshole.
Like a couple months ago, I remember seeing something resurface that Bloomberg had said about stop and frisk a while back, where he was basically like, it was something along the lines of like, well, we wouldn't have these problems if black people would just learn to behave in the workplace and behave on the street.
Yeah.
And I'm like, to which my response was, well, what the hell is your definition of behave? Like, your definition of behaving, like, is complying to white standards, and that's the definition of behaving that, white teachers and white police officers and white people with any modicum of authority have been pushing for years.
Yeah.
That like the only way to behave properly is to behave like culturally like a white person.
Yeah, and specifically a white person of a certain class, like the type of people Michael Bloomberg goes to cocktail parties with. I mean, yeah, Bloomberg is horrible, and that really was a moment that was very revealing to me, because, and it's why I do think that a lot of liberals are massive hypocrites and are closet racists, because all of a sudden I saw the same people who, 3 years earlier had been criticizing Bernie for, for not being perfect on the issue of race, turning around and suddenly being okay with the idea of supporting Michael Bloomberg. And not only that, but, just connecting criticism of him to this Russiagate nonsense. I would see people say, oh, criticism of Bloomberg is just Russian propaganda because the Russians don't want him. I mean, and they used that to attack Black Lives Matter too. They claimed it was, it was propped up by Russian agents in 2016 and contributed to Hillary losing. I mean, that's what disgusts me about that narrative. It's basically just taking John Bircher propaganda from the 50s and repurposing it and using it to just dismiss the idea that there's any real problems in this country. So that's why I just think liberals are the biggest phonies. Like they had no empathy. They didn't want to listen to anyone who had been stopped and frisked or racially profiled by the NYPD.
Well, I'll tell you, like a few years back, I was appalled, like not in the current school where I teach, but in the previous school where I taught, I had coworkers who basically, like, let's put it this way, there was one point where like they actually made a list of all of the students who they felt behaved well enough to earn the privilege to come upstairs and eat in the classrooms during lunch and help the teachers. And they actually went, like there was a whole group of kids that year that used to help their math teacher from the previous year, like kids that I taught that were 7th graders that would use, like the 6th grade math teacher would ask to come help her with like filing and stuff like that during their lunch period. And it came to the point where these 7th grade teachers actually made a list of all the kids whose behavior they thought was appropriate enough to be given the privilege to help the 6th grade teachers file.
Right.
And then the 6th grade teachers came to me pissed off because they noticed like the pattern. They noticed a clear pattern of like the kids who were on the yes, these are the kids who you should allow up list were like the Albanian and Bengali kids, and the kids who were on the no, they don't behave, they don't deserve the privilege were mostly Black and Latino kids. And the 6th grade teachers came to me because they were furious, and I said, what the hell? I didn't have any, they did that behind my back. Like, I agree with you. Like, their definition of bad behavior is like, a kid being a little too loud, or like they take it as like I read somewhere that like I feel like that a lot of arrests and police brutality in schools and whatnot happen because stupid teachers take it there. They drag it. Like, it starts with something simple, like the kid being in a little bit of a bad mood. Maybe he woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day or something, or didn't sleep well last night. And
the fact that there's police in schools to begin
well,
with.
the fact that there's police at schools to begin with is a much bigger problem. They don't need to be there. But a lot of issues where the police in school, where school safety was called, could have been de-escalated without them if the teachers didn't drag it, is what I found, like in my experience teaching, because it would always start with something simple, like a kid was talking a little bit too loudly, or like for the teacher's taste, or like the kid had a bad day, didn't get enough sleep last night, and the teacher didn't like how the kid reacted when they asked them to do something. They thought the kid like rolled their eyes or sucked their teeth at something that they said, and they escalated the situation to the point where they just made the kid more angry.
That's the same thing that the police do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in school, it starts with a lot of the teachers, and then it escalates to the police and continues to escalate when it didn't need to happen.
I mean, that's why they call it the school to prison pipeline. It begins right there because a lot of teachers are racist. I mean, a lot of people in every profession are racist, so it plays out in education. I mean, I noticed when I was in high school, because I went to a high school that was majority Black, that I got away with things that I knew Black kids wouldn't get away with. Like I would just see this unequal application of discipline. I knew a girl who was just slightly loud like the first few years I was in school, but she was all right. She was just a kid. And senior year, I asked one day, oh, where's Courtney? And I found out she'd been sent to Wright Tech, which was the school where they sent supposedly bad kids. And
She'd been sent to alternative school.
Yeah. And I just think about that to this day, about how these teachers who, you know, grow up in a mostly white, or who probably live in a mostly white enclave and don't see, you know, the kids they teach on a day-to-day basis, basically, and just also have no awareness of what the system is like and no empathy, basically just make these decisions that ruin a kid's life at a young age, just put them in the prison system just because they were in a bad mood on a particular day. And it really makes me sick.
Well, and I see too, like, you know, given that now, like, the school that I work at is kind of like a version of what Wright Tech was for you. Like my school is kind of like where the schools and where the district schools like pawn the kids that they don't want anymore. But a lot of them like, but I feel like that, like when they came, and I mean there's a couple kids I don't get along with at all, but there's going to be a couple kids I don't get along with at all, like regardless of what population I teach, because I'm just not going to get along with people, with all people. But
exactly.
But the majority of the kids, like I found more and more recently that it was actually easier for me to develop, like a flaw that I found in myself is that it was actually easier for me to develop a good relationship with my students when I saw them come in as a clean slate and not like with like a years of listening to their previous year teacher talk about their behavior. Like, because I found that like there's a lot of these kids that like I have very good relationships with, and when they tell me like why they're there, I'm like, what? You did that? You do not seem like the type. Like,
yeah,
you know, or like I had a kid tell me like, well, geez, Miss P, like, no teacher has ever been nice to me before like you have. Like, no teacher's ever listened to me. They've just yelled at me and given me detention and not done anything for me. And this is a kid that's like, you know, he's very smart, kind of lazy, but he's a very social kid. Like, and I could have seen him getting like a little bit chatty in class, but I could have also seen him going off on a teacher if they called him out for it in the wrong way. But he's not a bad kid.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so messed up about these teachers, that just don't realize that. They don't even care to form a relationship because they just come in to the classroom on the first day with, I guess, like you said, you know, either they've heard from the kids' previous year's teachers, or maybe they don't even have to hear that. Maybe they just have their stereotypes just fully intact, and that's enough. They don't even bother to learn the individuals.
Yeah, exactly. Or they like assume that certain kids are going to be bad, like based on their first day impressions of them. And I'm like, well, if I did that, like if I made assumptions about my kids on my especially this past year, if I made assumptions about the kids on the first day that I saw them, I would have just assumed that they were two big potheads to function, and that it was going to be a shithole year, and it wasn't at all. Well, until, I mean, COVID aside, but like it was a really fun year because myself and the majority of my colleagues that I was working with were the type of are the type of people who weren't prejudging the kids like that, and who were getting to know them as humans rather than as like problems that need to be taken care of.
Exactly.
But it's something I get passionate about because I used to just get so sick of working with teachers who who I just felt like saying, okay, you would really be a better teacher in Westchester or Long Island because you're not being culturally sensitive. You're treating these kids like you're like in the same way as you would treat a class of kids like in Scarsdale High School.
Well, actually, I think it's the opposite. I think it's that they don't treat them the same way. I mean, kids from, Scarsdale, kids from wealthy upper middle class backgrounds are just as likely to misbehave. I mean, like,
Well,
as an
let me
example,
rephrase that. I feel like they're holding kids to like the same expectations as kids in the suburbs without understanding the confounding factors that might
it's more like they
make the
hold
kids
them.
have trouble.
It's more like they hold them to a higher standard because a white kid in the burbs who has parents that might be doctors and lawyers is, a kid like that might have a bad day too, and they might mouth off to a teacher. They might just behave inappropriately, but they're not going to get the cops called on them. They're not going to get disciplined in the same way because it's institutional racism. I mean, just think about think about like the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. I mean, think about all the illegal, horrible stuff that rich white prep school kids are able to get away with that would ruin a black kid or even, a working class or poor white kid's life.
Well, I can tell you that, like, honestly, I can tell you from my own experience, even growing up in school, like a lot of the kids that I teach now have told me that they ostensibly were kicked out of their original schools for having quote unquote anger issues. Like, there were points in time when I, like, throughout my own K through 12 schooling career, when I had plenty of anger issues myself. Like, there were a few years in there where I was kind of known for like random temper tantrums in class that I feel like that I would have totally gotten, like, a school safety officer with handcuffs called on me for if that actually existed in my like white suburban school.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I keep thinking, like, like some of the students that I have really close relationships with, like, it's because we both kind of had, like, we kind of bonded over both having, like, some of the same issues growing up, but I got away with it a lot more than they did.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's because a lot of teachers just like see a black kid behaving the same way as a white kid, and they just treat them as an adult or as something to be feared, and it's just completely warped.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, in my case, like, they viewed it as like a spoiled little bratty kid throwing a temper tantrum.
Yeah. Or, like a boy in, that same school, probably be ADHD or something.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what's funny? I feel like that people have like, I feel like ADHD has become so much more of a thing than it was like when I was a kid. Because I feel like there were definitely kids who were just, that I went to school with, who were just like kids of any race, just kids in general, who were just written off as like being poorly behaved when, like, when I think back on it, they probably did have ADHD.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, a lot of people are getting diagnosed as adults now for the same, for the same reason. Like, I mean, I have ADHD, but I was diagnosed as a kid, but I never did anything to treat it until a couple years ago. And it's actually made my life a lot better. So that's another thing that, these schools might take into account unequally, is that, like, the kids who, like you said, would get handcuffed and have a school resources officer call on them, like they might have had ADHD too, but were just, treated like they were being violent or something.
Yeah, and I mean, like, in my case, it's like after a while, like they didn't, because they didn't have the option to do so, because and people don't think cops are needed in white middle class communities. Like, after a while, like, the teachers kind of figured out how to like calm me down when I started to get into like those anger fits that I would get sometimes. But like, I feel like if I was in a school where like, I feel like if I was a little black girl in a school that had police officers in it, I feel like the teachers wouldn't have like had the patience to put up with me to figure out like how to mitigate my behavior. They would have just called for school safety.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of gets me, is that, you know, for
Is
lack
school
of a,
safety different from the police? Like, is that different?
in New York, no. School
Okay.
safety is a division. That's actually where a lot of the defund the police campaign is focusing on, is that
Okay.
back in the day, like back in the 80s, school safety was like basically considered like a security guard.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
they were security
Public
guards,
safety.
and they were security guards employed by the DOE. But then
Okay.
when Giuliani became mayor and basically decided that like everything in New York was quote unquote infested with crime or whatever,
Right.
the school safety division got moved from DOE to the NYPD, so that the school safety officers, instead of being security guards, became actual cops
Right.
employed through the NYPD. And the cops in school, like the school safety division, they don't carry guns, which I suppose is like one silver lining, but it bugs me that they still carry like tasers and handcuffs and batons on them, because
Yeah.
they don't really need those either.
Right.
And what's interesting that I find is like, the school that I'm working now, because it's a charter school, we don't get school safety officers from the NYPD. Like, we had to hire private security guards out of
Yeah.
our own school budget.
Yeah.
And the private security guards are so much better with the kids than school safety officers and so much less intimidating because they're in uniform, but it's not an NYPD uniform and they don't have the power to arrest them or like.
Right. And they're not trained to like probably choke people out because they feel threatened.
No, they're not. Like we had a security guard that I swear, and I'm kind of mad that we didn't end up finishing the year in person, if only for the fact that I really think this security guard deserved a nice gift, because literally, like, a kid could be cussing him out in his face, and he was calmer than I was. Like, a kid could be cussing him out in his face and say, like, "You go to fucking hell, Nicholas. I'm not gonna do what you say, Nicholas. You go to fucking hell and die there," or whatever. And Nick, the security guard, would just be like, "Dude, it's not worth it. Calm down. Settle down." Like, he was very well trained in like de-escalation techniques rather than escalation techniques.
Yeah.
That's how police officers should be trained.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and the kids loved the security guards.
Well, they're on a first name basis with them.
Yeah. They're like, "Oh yeah." They're like, "Oh yeah, I had Shannon order food for me for lunch," and Shannon is the one that sits at the front desk and signs in guests, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I had Shannon order some food from Uber Eats for me and hold it at the security desk until lunch," like, or they'll go down. Sometimes the security guards actually had trouble shooing the kids away because they would literally go down to the security desk and just talk to the security guards about their problems.
Right.
Like, and I feel like that's what they're supposed to be there for. Like,
yeah,
that's doing it right, you know?
right.
That's really lucky.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it comes from having private security guards and not from having NYPD. And I don't necessarily believe in privatizing things, but I think that, like, if you have to have any kind of security in schools, which even suburban schools have some modicum of security now because of school shootings, like, even my elementary school that used to let Joe Schmo walk in off the street now has a buzzer. But, like, if you have to have security, have them be more like those security guards at my current school instead of like NYPD officers.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that is really lucky. It's because I mean I can imagine there's a lot of private security guards that also just act like rent-a-cops.
Buffoons too.
Yeah. So it's really amazing that you got lucky to have such good guys there.
Well, I mean, I don't work at your school, so I don't know, but I have a feeling more than luck, someone probably sought out a certain type of security that they were looking for.
I think you're probably right.
Right.
Like, I think that the administration had a say in like which guards that the company sent.
Yeah.
Because there were a couple of days when some of the guards were out and we had substitute guards, and I think that they actually called the company and said, "Don't send these guys back," because they were kind of like, there was a guy who came in as a substitute security guard like a couple days before COVID because one of them was out sick, possibly with COVID. And this security guy was like apparently a huge creeper. Like, apparently he was taking pictures of the kids playing basketball in gym class, and they had to call the. I mean, I don't know if I would go so far as to say that necessarily, because when I say kids, like, we're talking 17 and 18-year-olds.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But
That's just what I thought when you said he was a creeper taking pictures of the
But
kids.
but it was still creepy.
Yeah.
Because he's still taking photos of them without their permission. And then
True.
the administrators like called the security guard, called the security company and was like, yeah, don't send that guy back again.
Definitely not.
And then he claimed when we asked him about it, like when they asked him about it, he claimed he was just taking pictures of the kids to show the deans which ones were misbehaving because he didn't know their names.
That's just wrong on multiple levels. Like, and that makes the team look bad too. Wow, what a creep.
Yeah, and like the regular security guard would have never done that.
Yeah, I could imagine the dean being like, "Gee, thanks a lot, you idiot. You're pawning this off on me now. I'm gonna get looked at suspiciously."
Yeah, exactly. And the poor dean put up with enough as it was.
Yeah.
Like the poor guy got slapped across the face twice in the year.
Yeah.
And still
the
had
dean?
like
The dean?
yeah, and still never raised his voice above this level. And I'm like, well, that's how you can tell he's the right person for the job. But I see it like a lot, like I get the sense that like kids do so much better. Cynthia disappeared. Kids do so much better when they do. Kids do so much better, like when they come to us than they were doing in their old schools, simply because they were like ostensibly they were criminalized in their old schools.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm glad the school is there then. I mean, in an ideal world, all public schools would be like that, and the NYPD wouldn't be anywhere near any public school or any police officer ever, because there's just no reason for that. And I remember my public high school had a cop, and he was armed, and I didn't even, and I thought that was a little weird at the time, but yeah, it's a way of treating kids like criminals, and it's completely warped, and it's just another function of the sickness at the root of our society.
Whereas, like, you would mention that your school was majority Black, and
yeah.
My high school, on the flip side, my high school was majority white. I mean, not all white, but majority white. And we only had, the only times the police ever came to the school was if somebody actually called them, or B, to teach DARE,
Yeah.
Which was another clusterfuck of a program that didn't work.
Yeah, fucking Nancy Reagan.
And you're just saying, I'm so glad that doesn't exist anymore. Like, I feel like DARE caused people to do drugs because they got curious.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, the way they branded it as is just a bunch of cool kids standing under the bleachers smoking weed, and you're like, hey, that actually looks pretty cool. I want to do some of that.
It's not really like that at all. That's not what peer pressure is.
It's kind of like there's this page on Facebook, like, shit conservatives say that would be awesome if it was true, and it's like always some conservative saying, well, what's next if you give everyone free healthcare, free housing, free money? And I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds awesome.
If you give a mouse a cookie, he's gonna want a glass of milk.
Yeah.
Yeah, all this stuff that sounds great. Stuff that should be policy.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, free housing, that's my big issue. That's the issue I've been pushing. We should be pushing
for everyone, or just for low income?
For everyone.
For everyone, yeah.
Free housing for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
That'd be amazing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But But if there were to be, like, if we were to move to a system where, like, all basic necessities were free, I mean, it's not like that they wouldn't be paid for. They would just be paid for a different way through people's taxes.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we could afford to pay more taxes because we weren't paying rent.
Well, yeah, again, I propose that it's such a progressive tax, and the people, specifically the corporations at the top, have so much money that if we incorporated a progressive tax, like none of us in this room would like feel it like one bit.
Exactly, and you would, you know, tax the rich at like 90% and stop spending trillions on the drug war and on, you know, weapon systems that even the Pentagon doesn't want. It's absurd.
Stop spending billions of dollars on like Nancy Reagan's Just Say No.
Exactly, yeah.
Instead, we should all just say yes.
I mean, we have enough wealth in this job and money, housing. How are you going to pay for it when it comes to doing anything for people, but never when it comes to starting another war? It's just such nonsense.
Or bailing out these corporations.
Yeah.
You know, so that they can give their CEOs like huge windfalls.
Exactly.
Like, it came to the point, like, and I mean, the students that I teach aren't necessarily of the DARE generation anymore. Fortunately, they quit that nonsense before they got to this generation of kids. But
DARE was still around up until a few years ago, weren't they? Aren't they still around, DARE? They're just not as big anymore?
I don't think they're around anymore.
Well, because I saw like anti-DARE sentiment like a few years ago when I was in DC. Like there were people like basically like against DARE. I feel like DARE was set up in front of a grocery store that I went into.
I mean, I think it's been gone like since like the early 2010s, maybe.
Yeah, this was more recent than that.
I mean, I graduated high school in 2007, and I don't specifically remember there being a DARE presentation. I mean, if there was, I may have just forgotten it because
yeah, maybe they weren't in the school. Maybe they weren't like, maybe it's just become a smaller function.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember being shown scary videos in elementary school about which like I remember one which started with 3 kids saying, "Oh, we're dead, and this is what happened to us," and it just starts with like, you know, you smoking one joint at a party and then advancing to heroin. I mean, this was some retrograde reefer madness bullshit, and it was being shown to like 8-year-olds.
Yeah, so according to this page here, DARE America International postpones 2020 International Training Conference. So they're still around, but they're just not as ubiquitous as they were before.
I think they're not in schools like they used to be, is what it is.
Right, yeah.
But like, so my kids didn't get as many of the scare tactics when they were growing up. And now, like, I feel like, you know, to speak of things that conservatives say, that like conservatives would be like, oh, but you see, the kids are all smoking too much weed now. But like, it finally came to the point where I just told them, listen, it's your personal life. I don't give a crap what you do outside of school hours. Smoke as much weed as you want. Just don't do it in our bathroom, please. And I think that kind of worked in a sense that like they had enough respect not to try to sneak and do it on school grounds. Now on Zoom, that kind of turned into another story, but
on film,
but like
Zoom.
There were a couple of kids who didn't have the foresight to go in ghost mode, as Ish would put it, like
Right.
when they lit up a blunt.
Flav, since Emily and I were talking about our high schools, what was your high school like? Do you remember there being cops there ever?
No, I went to a suburban high school. I don't remember there being cops. I remember there being like, some security guard. A big husky guy who people made it a point to say that he could outrun anyone that they've seen him like run people
Where
down.
were you in high school? Like this, when you say the suburbs, you mean like the suburbs, like where Ish lives now, or like?
Well, this is a Liverpool high school. It's a
Oh,
suburb
so you
of.
were in Syracuse?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you were actually closer to where I was. So yeah, I feel like that, like.
Funny, Flav, when you said Liverpool, I was about to say, wow, you really lost your British accent.
Yeah. No, I feel like
Yeah, I worked on that.
Yeah,
I feel like we might have played your school in sports at like one point or another. Maybe not in the same division, but we've definitely played schools in the Syracuse area in sports.
I remember listening to the long list of school districts being closed, and hearing Utica be one of them, hoping that Liverpool would be on that list.
Well, I mean, I didn't go to because CBS, Utica didn't have a CBS station, so our CBS was from Syracuse, so they would read all the Syracuse schools and all the Utica area schools, although I wasn't in Utica proper. Like, if I had been in Utica district proper, it would have been much more like going to school down here, but yeah, like, so I can imagine like where you were at being very similar to like where I was at.
Yep. I mean, I think Liverpool is, it's probably a bigger suburb, I think.
No, it is.
Yeah.
It is, like, because Utica doesn't really have big suburbs.
Right.
Because, like, Utica itself is only 60,000 people.
Right.
And then there was something like within the confines of my school district, there were like 10,000 people, and that's counting adults.
Yeah, Norwalk would qualify as what I think is a big suburb. I think it had between 80 and 120,000 people, and it was, working class town. So I mean, basically a suburb, but it's big outside New York City suburb.
But like, how many people would you say you had in your graduating class?
Probably about 500, because there was 2,000 in the school total. So I estimate it was about 500 students in every grade.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think we only had 150, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, because you have to know everyone, right? Like, you just can't avoid anyone.
Well, and the worst problem of it was that, like, I was in a district so small that there was only one elementary school, one middle school, one high school. So everybody was basically like, save for like the scattered kids who move in and out here and there, whose families move in and out of the district here and there. I would say about 2/3 of my graduating class was there in kindergarten.
Wow.
So like, because people didn't move around a lot. So if you do something embarrassing in elementary school, someone's still going to remind you of it in 12th grade.
Oh God, yeah. That's the kids are the worst like that.
Like, it was horrible.
Yeah. I bet.
And then my mom wonders why my brother's the one who's more readily willing to come back up her, to come help her with her house.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I guess he didn't have any, embarrassing moments.
I don't know, like my brother is like, he's still like he's still like very nerdy, but somehow like, as much as he doesn't think he was, I think he was more social and more socially astute than I was as a teenager. The older child, younger child thing, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe I made all the mistakes for him.
Maybe.
But it's weird because everybody knew everybody. Like I even knew like the kids in my brother's grade. Like I would babysit for them, or I would like be driving them around if I was picking my brother up from activities and stuff like that. And it's so weird to me because I think of all those kids as like little kids, but they're really like the same age as like you and Cynthia now.
Yeah, that's the way it is. It's so funny, how that your perception that's in place at a particular time always stays the same.
Like I had the realization when I took my brother to the doctor this morning. I looked at him and I was like, you look just like our dad did in pictures, like with me as a baby. And then I'm like, wait a sec, you're the same age as he was when I was born.
Crazy to think about. Yeah, time flies like that. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing too when you see people's sort of family resemblance.
Well, it's kind of inadvertently happened with my brother because my dad used to have like the kind of like the Beatles hair over the ear style haircut, and it's kind of happened inadvertently with my brother now because all the barbers have been closed due to COVID.
Yeah.
He's getting the bowl cut.
He's kind of ended up with the Beatles haircut, and then, and when I mentioned it to him, he's like, yeah, but he was kind of being a negative Nancy. He was like, well, the barbers are just going to close again when there's a second wave, so I'm just going to teach myself how to give myself a buzz cut. And I'm like, I'd like to think a little more positively. Like, I'm not discounting the fact that there could be a second wave. Like,
and also, why not just let your hair grow out for a while? Try something new, like buzz cut. I mean, I couldn't imagine a buzz cut. Ever having a buzz cut, looking like some just bullet head.
And I mean, like, it's funny because, like, in my experience, like, around me, like, it's been the men that have had worse results of the barbershops being closed and salons being closed than the women. And maybe it's just because, like, it's more obvious, like, with people with short hair, like, when you're getting shaggy.
Yeah. I mean,
but I feel
just took the opportunity. No, go on. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like I haven't been like nearly in the rush to go to the hair salon that like most of the men around me have been to go to the barber.
Yeah. I've been in no way to go. I just decided I was gonna roll with it for a while.
Yeah, I got something to like line myself up with. What
were you gonna say, Flav?
I got something that I used to line my beard up with, a bevel. It's like an expensive T-liner that like lines you up pretty sharp. I just use it for my beard, but even that I haven't used a lot. I've only used twice since I bought it like over a month ago.
Yeah, and even like my hair, like I've kind of taught myself how to color it so as how I want, and that's probably just as well because that's like cheaper than actually having someone else do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't clean up the mess in the bathroom, but
It's funny, I've had long hair for years, but I it's funny, I've had long hair for years in the past to actually groom it very well, so it would always get all, all tangly after a while and would practically hurt to comb it. It actually took the quarantine for me to take the time to actually, read some articles on proper hair grooming and such. So yeah, making more of an actual.
I feel like Joey turned into a robot.
Yeah, his voice was, your voice was slowing down a lot.
Oh shit. I guess we all take turns with that. I mean, am I still robotic right now? What do I sound like?
No, you're good.
Good.
But all the videos froze for me. Did that happen to anybody else?
The videos froze? No. We just see the top of your head, so we can't tell if you're frozen or not.
I'm saying for everybody else.
Or if you're just not moving.
Blink if you're being held hostage.
Yeah, nod your head, Cynthia.
Yeah, I think I'm frozen then. You guys are frozen too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why I left before, because it keeps happening. What the hell?
Siri, stop. I'm not talking to you.
Okay, I'm going to try to exit and re-enter again.
Okay.
Siri thought I was talking to her.
Really? Siri's nosy.
Siri's very nosy. Siri's a know-it-all.
Did you make that yourself, Joey?
Going somewhere?
Joey, did you make that yourself?
Yeah.
What's it?
No, actually, it's just, I think it's just from an old shirt, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like, I just felt like putting it on for a second. I felt like I went into a store the other day and I was in there for like 10 minutes and it almost felt like it was too tight on me. Like I just, like my nose, I don't know. I felt like I couldn't breathe out of it. It almost felt like it was too tight. Like it could have been like a weird, like erotic asphyxiation rubber mask or something.
Yeah, it sounds like you need a bigger one.
Yeah, definitely.
Sounds like we're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yeah.
Do you have a custom one? Is that why?
No, I don't. No, I don't get, custom. I mean, it's a homemade one, but yeah, I just think I just think I was maybe wearing it too tightly or something. I don't know. No, I don't get custom erotic asphyxiation masks.
Well, you should try some of the lines from Pulp Fiction next time you put that on. See how it works.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You know what's kind of ironic?
Definitely.
Is that we never ended up reading a script.
Yeah, Flav.
No, that is we should totally do that. Let's do Pulp Fiction.
Oh God.
I mean, yeah, we can still do a script.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this could be like waiting for Haley's Comet to pass or something, but I feel like we should read a script when KD is around because then we have the professionals.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm down.
Is he an actor?
Yeah.
Oh, he is? Oh, okay. That helps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down to do it.
Extra work.
I'm down to do it. Another time when I'm like ready and.
Well, it was supposed to be this week because we discussed it last week, Flav.
Yeah. Well,
what is that? Ooh, is that food?
No, it's fucking trash.
Oh.
All over my fucking shit.
Well, if you'd like to eat that, you're welcome to.
Was it food is a better question.
No, it was trash.
Oh.
That
makes me want to get some fries.
At one point it was, but...
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Fries are shit. No, it was long enough ago that I'm just annoyed that it's falling all over the place. It's not like...
That's a nice bag, though, for like a restaurant. It's so colorful.
Yeah, they forgot half of my shit. I wasn't very happy with them.
Oh.
Was it the Stay Fresh Deli and Grill?
No. But they're known for forgetting your shit too.
I thought you said the state puff marshmallow man for a second.
Might as well be.
Yeah. Hey, there's another one we could do, Ghostbusters.
I'm down for that.
Yeah.
You know what's another one? Men in Black.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
That would be great. Or oh my god, you know what would be a great one? My Cousin Vinny.
I love My Cousin Vinny, yeah.
Can we please put that on the list? It's the last scene on the list.
After Clerks. Although I feel...
At least I tried to blend in. Yeah, what are you, a fucking world traveler?
Oh my god, I just see this article on Reddit. Las Vegas police to charge $280 per hour for body cam footage. Are you fucking kidding me?
Wait, what does that mean?
Make it private? I think to release their body cam footage, they'll charge.
What are they doing? Making porn?
They can't legally do that. I mean, I'm sure it wouldn't survive a court challenge. That's public property.
Yeah, who are they charging that to? It's like, it would be different if a private citizen wanted it for their own use, but you can't
it used to be $192. I didn't know you had to pay for that shit.
You shouldn't. I mean, that's ridiculous. Someone should sue their asses.
Yeah, that's just a deterrent. So you can't see what they're doing. That's crazy.
The department is facing blowback from open government advocates who say the fees are unreasonably high, no shit, undermine transparency, no shit, and conflict with public records law, no shit.
Yeah.
Quote, fees as a general rule are a barrier to transparency, said Nevada Open Government Coalition President Patrick Pyle, without directly accusing Metro of trying to prevent people from requesting or receiving records. Requesters can be forgiven for thinking that costs this high are intended to prevent them from requesting records.
Yeah, that sounds like it goes against the Freedom of Information Act.
The USA Today network asked Las Vegas police about criticisms that the fee hike infringes on state law. This was an administrative decision, Officer Hanfield said. Let's see how this plays out.
Fuck you. That sounds like another way of saying fuck you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a translation.
That's insane. If they do this across the board, oh my god, this would be a nightmare.
Yeah, I hope someone's filing a lawsuit against them, right?
Yeah, because I feel like you can't do that.
Shouldn't be allowed to. I mean, the reason why the body cam footage is there is that for
Is to hold them
transparency reasons.
accountable.
Yeah. And you know what? They should make body cam footage, like cameras that can't be turned off by them. Or, like, someone should be notified if it has been turned off. What is the point of having a body cam if you can turn it off?
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense.
They should, I mean, if anything, they should create a job where, like, people, you know, in the communities being policed can, like, sit there and watch the body cams all day.
Yeah. But that would kind of be like, you mean like a third party? Or someone within the department?
A third party, I would say.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
No, someone from the community that's being policed and fucked with.
Yeah.
Definitely not the cops. That's for sure.
I mean, all the police unions are pretty much looking out for their own ass, so for that to...
Yeah, well, I think police unions are about to
happen.
end, I think, if we're lucky.
I hope
unions
so.
are hard to just dismantle.
Yeah, well, police union's not really a union. They just like operate with impunity.
Well,
Yeah, like
unions
like
are
I was saying the other day, there is no other union that lobbies for the right to basically murder people. Like imagine if the building trades union, like every time a construction worker or a crane operator dropped a crane and killed a pedestrian, they lobbied for them to keep their job. I mean, that would never happen. Or like a funny meme I saw, if
the teacher hit a kid.
Yeah, or if librarians, basically lobbied for the right to strangle someone for talking in the library. Like that was the meme I
saw. I'm sure we've all been there where we wanted to do that, but
yeah.
Where we wanted to strangle someone who was talking in the library.
To have that. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea.
I'm sure they would love to, put that into their next union contract.
Yeah, unions wielding the power of violence is like a thing that's hopefully going to go pretty soon.
Although, I mean, I'm okay with that when it comes to wildcat strikes. Like, like if unions want to fight off Pinkerton detectives, or if they want to, make it impossible for people to go into the store, that's them exercising their labor power. It's when, an institution like the police in particular do it, an institution that is supposed to have the public trust, that just lobbies for the right to be tyrants, that I have a problem. But otherwise, I'm very much in favor of labor militancy.
Yeah, but the police union isn't, like you said, it's not really a labor union. They're not like going on strike for workers for like OSHA rights or something. They're going on strike like basically to be like, what? You're going to take away our guns and tasers and means of violently suppressing people?
I mean, yeah, they're the ones who are called to suppress labor organizing. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They've been antithetical to union organizing forever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the world is so fucked.
That's for sure.
Oh my God.
When we can't solve all those all the problems in the space of 3 hours.
Yeah.
Remember when we were kids and we didn't even know these problems existed, and our family or people just shielded us from these problems?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I feel like I saw like, as a little kid, I feel like I saw like Sesame Street, like address racism and stuff like that.
What?
Yeah, Sesame Street.
I feel like Sesame Street, like when I was little, like that was my first exposure to addressing racism was on Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sesame Street used to be pretty cutting edge.
I mean, you know what's weird is, like, I was kind of realizing this lately because I keep finding old episodes of, like, old PBS shows that people have, like, digitized from their VHS tapes and put on YouTube. And I see, like, you know, like Sesame Street or like Ghost Rider, for example. Like, I look back on them and I'm like, you know, that's how I was, like, exposed to different cultures as a kid, basically, because I was living in such, like, a homogeneous real life culture. But yet, like, I saw people of all different walks of life on PBS when I got home from school.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess I didn't really realize how much of a benefit PBS actually had.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were, like, covering issues of race and, like, police brutality and whatnot, like,
Yeah, and Republicans,
at
of
an
course, are always trying to
age-appropriate
defund it.
manner. Yeah, because they don't want kids to know about that stuff, so they can keep doing it. But I feel like that, like,
Yeah,
and partially no thanks to the
exactly.
Republicans defunding PBS, I feel like that, like, the shows just, like, the children's programming on PBS was just so much better when we were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like, now they don't have, like, shows, like, now they don't have, like, you know, a replacement.
Probably was.
Now it's like, you know, Sesame Street's on freaking HBO, and they don't have an equivalent to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or, like, Ghost Rider or Bill Nye the Science Guy or, like, stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, like, really smart educational shows. It's really sad.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of the techniques that, like, are kind of embedded into some of these shows are, like, teaching techniques that I still use, like, to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, like, when I watch old episodes of Ghost Rider and they're talking about, like, when you're trying to figure out, like, vocabulary words that you don't know, looking for context clues, or, like, trying to fill in letters for, like, words that are missing letters, or, like, things like that. Or they talk about, like, you know, skimming things for, like, the most important information. And those are some of, like, those are, like, the reading techniques, like, that's what teachers tell kids to do all the time. Like, I always tell kids, like, who complain about having to read too many words, I tell them, well, try to just skim it for the most important information first. Don't read it too closely.
Yeah. I mean, that's
but I
what
feel
helped.
like that was embedded in PBS when I was a kid, and it was so, like, stealthily embedded that I didn't even realize I was learning because I was so like caught up in watching the show.
Yeah.
Educational entertainment was, like, a great idea, like how they had the what was it, like the Erie Canal song?
Yeah, you don't even realize it, and that's why like, I 16 horse barges on the Erie Canal.
Yeah. I know a girl, her name is Sal. 16
years on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker and a good old pal. 15 minutes on the Erie Canal.
Wait, what is it? 15 what?
15 miles or 15 tons, something 15 on the Erie Canal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I always said years, but I don't know. I could always mess up lyrics too.
Uh-huh. No, I think it was 15. Actually, yeah, 15 years sounds about right.
And then there was, like, then there was like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh, that was great. Rockapella.
Wait, so what is the one where like you die of dysentery?
Oregon Trail.
Oh yeah, yeah, Oregon Trail. And then there was like some mathematician stuff. It was like
Square One.
Oh, Square One. Yeah, yeah, that was great. That was like the best thing in school. Was like watching that. Do you remember the theme song to that?
It was like.
I don't think I remember that one.
Yeah, it was like Square One.
And then it always ended with MathNet.
Yeah, MathNet.
What channel were these shows on? I don't remember the last
two. On PBS.
It was like PBS, yeah.
Oh.
What about Schoolhouse Rock? You guys remember that?
Yeah.
The movie or?
I just remember, I don't know if it was even a show or a movie. I actually just remember like a game of it that I had. It was really fun, and I love the songs in it too. It was a lot of good memories.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. That's always how I'll remember how a bill becomes a law now.
Yeah, those are great ways to learn.
Yeah.
Where have all of these educational shows gone? I feel like the ones nowadays, or at least the ones I see, are geared towards like kids. Like they teach them in a way. Kids. Yeah, I mean, but even as a little kid, I used to watch shows like Bill Nye the Science Guy and whatnot, and I feel like I retained some of that information. So,
or is anyone old enough to remember Mr. Wizard?
Vaguely. Oh, wow. I might have seen reruns.
He was before Bill Nye. He was like the original.
Yeah, but Bill Nye's better because I don't know.
I mean, it's you know, Mr. Wizard was first. Mr. Wizard's the OG.
Yeah, but I don't know him, and most people don't either. Otherwise, there would be memes and gifs of Mr. Wizard.
Yeah, well, you know, you guys didn't start the fire.
You know what's so weird is that I remember there being like all sorts of like really cool programming on Nickelodeon during the days like when I would stay homesick from school. Mm-hmm. Like I remember like they're watching like Captain Kangaroo and like Eureka's Castle and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know, why is the programming this good? Like during school hours, they should show all the crappy programming now to force kids to go to school.
Funny, Captain Kangaroo made me think of Pulp Fiction, because it made me think of that 60s song in Pulp Fiction by the Statler Brothers, where there's the line, smoking cigarettes and watching Captain Kangaroo. Now don't tell me I have nothing to do.
I mean, that's like, you know, why couldn't they show, like, you know, why couldn't all the channels show, like, QVC or something during school hours so we wouldn't be tempted to skip school?
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like I had a routine of, like, what to watch when I was homesick from school.
Although I would just watch a video sometimes, like you know, because I was a baseball freak at the time. I had like old World Series highlight videos.
Yeah, I mean, like I didn't really get into like the baseball fandom stuff until I was like a teenager, but like elementary school I would get excited about staying homesick for the TV. And then by the time I got to like middle school and high school, I was like too scared to stay homesick because I felt like missing one day was like missing an entire week with how much I would have to do to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I ever actually actually skipped school until my senior year when I stopped caring and I would just go down to the deli a lot. Although I almost wasn't allowed to graduate because of that, because I like had to take one computer class which I hadn't taken until senior year, and like I had so many absences I almost go to the deli, but I forget I just barely went to enough classes to get like a D minus.
Yeah. I mean, you know what's funny is that, like, I feel like that, like, by senior year of high school, it's like I was over it, but I still wanted to get, it's like I was over it, but I still wanted to get good grades, even though there was absolutely no reason to worry about my grades anymore.
Hey, you were an overachiever. More power to you.
Yeah, I kind of was an overachiever. most of my famed elementary school temper tantrums were actually over grades. Like, I seriously, when they first started giving us A's and B's and C's and stuff in like third or fourth grade, the first time I got a C on a test, I made a big show of like ripping it up and like running to the stomping my foot and screaming and running to the garbage can and throwing it out.
Wow.
Because I was so mad because it was like the first grade like in my life that I'd gotten that wasn't an A, except for like in gym.
Oh man, it's all down here from Hill. That's it. I'm never going to middle school. I'm never.
My life is over.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get addicted to heroin by the time I'm 14 and die in an alley somewhere. This is it. I got a 1C in third grade.
Like, I'll never get into a good college now.
Did you say that on purpose? It's down here from the hill.
I might have. Yeah, I'm tired, I guess. I don't know. I don't. No, I didn't say that.
Oh,
on
that
purpose,
was funny.
Yeah.
It would have been funny if you did. Did you guys hear that Washington State announced Wednesday a new face mask requirement that will allow violators to be charged with a misdemeanor crime?
Nice. No. Did that just come out?
Yeah, it says starting Friday, every Washingtonian must wear a facial covering when in a public space, as mandated by the public health order signed by Secretary of Health John Wiseman. This includes both indoor and outdoor public spaces, Governor Jay Inslee stated.
Ooh, the police are going to have a field day enforcing that. Damn.
Yeah.
Are they going to give themselves tickets? I see them without their face covered every day.
Yeah, because they want to expose people to COVID. Like at the protests, it was awful.
That's true. Like, even not at the protests, like, I'll leave to go around the corner to run to Dwayne Reed, like, to get a couple things, which is like the extent of where I've gone for like the first like 2.5 months of the COVID, and they'll be standing outside the precinct just yapping away with each other, not wearing masks, and I'll be like, I'm staying as far away from you as possible.
Yeah, idiots. What are you trying to say, Flav?
So I'm wondering, like, there's exemptions to this for like people with certain medical conditions, but like, what are they going to do? Like, are they going to like take people's word for it that they have certain medical conditions, or probably not, depending on like what you look like, or if they want to mess with you?
That's what I wonder, because there's been like an influx that I've seen going around on the internet, basically, of Karens trying to get out of wearing a face mask by claiming that they have some medical exemption that they don't really have.
Then they can wear a face shield.
That's true, Cynthia. You're right. Like, they could wear a face, like, say it's like they have, I was reading a thread somewhere on Facebook today that said the same thing. Like, where people were like, if you can't wear a mask, wear a face shield. Like,
yeah,
Okay.
just to
if you have,
yeah,
if you like have asthma or breathing problems or something.
Right.
I mean, I still wear masks even though I have asthma, and even though like I can't stand what bothers me more about the masks isn't the idea of not being able to breathe even so much as like I just miss seeing the bottom half of people's faces because I feel like so much of communication is like expressed non-verbally.
yeah.
But again, there's ways to get around that. Like, for example, like you said, Cynthia, you could wear a face shield instead of a mask. Or like, for example, I ordered transparent, like clear masks.
Clear masks? What are they made of?
Like some sort of like a vinyl or a plastic or something. Like where
No, the problem is that how would you get air through?
that's what I wonder. I mean, I'm gonna
Yeah.
wait to see what happened. I'm gonna wait to see like what they look like when they come. But I feel like that like
Wait, I just Googled this. Hold on. Is this what it is?
it's something like that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Jesus, that looks like a Vice script that they like put Hannibal Lecter in or something.
But it wasn't that particular one. Like the ones that I ordered were like, you know, not with the Vice grip part on them, were just like a regular face mask, but clear.
So
Well, it's foam, but I just don't know how it vents if it's like a plastic.
so
Yeah.
there's a Facebook group called Freedom to Breathe that are
Oh
making,
my God. That's the reason why we're doing this, so people can breathe.
they're making these fake mask exemption cards as a way to get around wearing a mask. And
Yeah,
there's
wait.
just a warning if you come across these cards, they have absolutely, there's absolutely no official government cards.
Well,
Wait, Emily, is this it? If you wore this would terrify me.
no, it's not that. Like those are ones that people made for like people who were teaching deaf people.
Yeah, which is a good idea. I mean, it does exactly what you want, which is to express
Because that's
more
the thing
facial
is like
expressions.
I'm like I feel like that like it would be I'm gonna see.
Is it this?
Yeah, it's like that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
Interesting.
see how that I'm gonna try it out over the summer, like when I'm still not going into work. Because I feel like that like if we go back to teaching in person in the fall, they'll probably require us to wear masks. But I feel like it's a good thing for like, especially after all the crap that they've been through, for kids to be able to see like their teachers smiling. Like psychologically, it kind of like I was reading somewhere that like psychologically it does a lot for like, for lack of a better term, like for people who have had trauma to be able to see a smiling face.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Just to know that, you're not someone, that's going to repeat their trauma, someone that is not to be feared.
Yeah. But here's the thing is like but the point is that I have things that annoy me about having to wear a mask, but that doesn't just mean that I don't do it. You know what I mean?
You know what I do like about wearing a mask? That people can't see my facial expressions. If I'm like jamming out to a song, no one can see me like
well, yeah, I like that
like a crazy
strangers
person.
can't. I like that strangers can't see like me talking to myself or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, in talking to like people I know,
Yeah.
it's so much nicer to see people's faces.
Sometimes. But yeah. Kitty!
Oh, what's your cat's name?
John Snowden.
Oh, cool, cute.
What were you saying? That
A St. Louis mayor broadcasted names, addresses of
I saw that.
citizens calling for police reform.
Doxing your own people.
I've never heard of a mayor doxing people. That's pretty fascist.
That's awful.
Well, the video was taken down, but that's disgusting.
Yeah, that's
like it
horrible.
Clearly shows which side you're on.
Yeah.
Oh. But we do need police reform. I was reading an NPR article today, and they were talking with like a former police officer, and he was pretty much going into detail about, well, not into detail, but he was saying like the gist of police training is pretty much like self-defense, almost getting them in the mindset like this is a dangerous job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like putting them in a mindset where you're the enemy and everyone you encounter is an enemy. I'm like, maybe decades ago that was an issue, especially in cities like New York. But like nowadays, that's not an issue. You need to like train people to handle situations. You need to like assign cops to areas where they're comfortable. Don't assign someone who's like only used to like dealing with suburban issues. Don't send them into the hood. Of course they're going to be scared. You don't know the people. You don't understand the culture.
Right.
Like, it's just very dangerous to be doing that.
Yeah.
Also stop having so many, stupid, completely pointless laws for them to enforce. Like, stop having are complete hypocrites. Like, the fact that the city decided to crack down on loose cigarettes was just another example of Mayor Bloomberg's nanny state bullshit. And it's the result of the fact that cigarettes are taxed like at a ridiculous rate because we can't let adults decide what to do with their body, and they decided that that's the question I want to ask anyone who thinks something should be illegal. Do you want to give men with guns the power to enforce it? I mean, and when you really ask that question, I think you realize that very few things should be against the law, like prostitution, drugs at their worst are a medical issue that is deserving of treatment, not a crime someone should ever be arrested for.
So like addiction is not shouldn't be criminalized, you mean?
Addiction shouldn't be criminalized, and most like marijuana should be legalized, obviously. But yeah, whenever I hear people just saying there ought to be a law, I just think, okay, so who gets the power to enforce
that law?
Yeah, really, it's beyond just assigning police to particular areas. And to your point, even in the day when crime was a lot higher, there was still no reason for the police to see citizens as the enemy. There's no excuse for police to ever act that way. They know they have a dangerous job. Really, we should just have far fewer things be against the law and far fewer police interactions with the public, period. I mean, most things can be dealt with. I think a lot of things can be dealt with peacefully, just among people. There's ways to resolve conflicts without even having to call in an armed, men with guns. So yeah, there should be far fewer cops and far fewer things against the law.
I mean, I think for me, my issue is not that there are so many laws that have to be enforced. It's just, it seems like whether a particular law is enforced is based like it's different, like police to police. It's not across the board. If they were to enforce the law on every single citizen, then that would be one thing. But they're clearly like targeting like lower people in lower economic status than like rich people.
Well,
it's
the thing is,
clear that the punishment's not the same. And that's very frustrating.
I mean, I agree with that, but I mean, I also think the laws themselves are unjust, period. And I don't like this, Malthusian idea of the equality where we're just going to turn around and be totalitarian. I mean, I think this rule is still unjust and is still tyrannical. So I don't think if the police were treating everyone like shit and shooting and being violent towards everyone, that would be somehow more justified.
Well, I mean, no, but you're right.
Yeah, they shouldn't be shooting at anybody.
And and we just shouldn't have so many. We just shouldn't have, so many stupid laws to begin with.
We need to get rid of police quotas, first of all, because what the fuck?
Yeah.
To think that there's a quota for, like, arresting people or not arresting people, but just, like,
for tickets and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck? Why is there a quota? And I feel like they increase it all the time. Like, so they can get more funding to prove that they're needed? Is that the reason why? Never understood that.
Yeah, that started in the late 90s, actually right when the crime rate was beginning to go down. Matt Taibbi talked about this in his book. I forget, Grifftopia, when he was just talking about the inequality of the American justice system, that in the late 90s, when the crime rate started to go down, cops had far fewer crimes to process, so they had, less overtime hours, so they started lobbying for the right to prosecute sub-misdemeanors, some of which could just include arresting someone for loitering because they're standing either too close to the street or too close to the building.
So you mean they literally made a part-time, so they literally, instead of being like, well, looks like this is a part-time job, they like gave themselves more work to do by criminalizing acts.
Yeah, it was all a maneuver for job security.
Should have just been a part-time job.
Well, wait, I'll tell you, my one speeding ticket that I got, my one out-of-state speeding ticket that I got ended up turning into like a huge nightmare, like that it should have never turned into, because I don't remember which of you were in on the call when I was describing those whole circumstances of getting pulled over on the way to the airport and getting like a nasty asshole cop who was like taunting me for being from New York.
Yeah.
But that speeding ticket turned into like a much bigger thing than it ever needed to. Because first the damn officer gave me a quote unquote date to appear in court that was like only a week away, and then let me go. But no way in hell I'm buying like a $300 plane ticket to fly to appear in court to contest a $100 ticket.
Right.
So, and they know that. That's why they're setting up like speed traps near the airport, because they know people are leaving.
Oh shit! Yeah.
But like
that's crazy that they can do that.
So I was like, well, I'm mad about this, but it's gonna cost more to pay a lawyer or fly back to fight it. So I'm just not. I don't really have an option.
Fly back where?
To Kentucky.
Oh.
I don't really have an option to like pay a lawyer down there or fly back myself to go to court, so I'm just gonna have to pay it. So I get on my flight, I still make my flight, fortunately, because I think the guy was doing everything he possibly could to stall me from making my flight, just because he wanted to be a jackass. But so then when I get back home to New York, I look at the information about how to go about paying the ticket. It says, well, you can either send us a money order or you can go online and pay it on the internet with a credit card. So I tried to pay it with a credit card online. Now this is where the early court date comes in, and I'm convinced the guy just did this to be a jackass. I got to, the automated system told me that my court date was too near in the future to pay using the internet, and that I would have to either appear in court or mail or get my butt to the post office and mail them the fee right quick. So the next morning, I get back on a Sunday night, whatever. The next morning Monday morning, I go to the post office. I purchase a money order. I purchase a priority mail envelope with a return receipt and mail in my payment to pay the fine. A few days later, I get the return receipt back in my mailbox with someone's signature from the courthouse. So I'm like, okay, good, this is taken care of. About a month later, mind you, I literally remember, I was coming back from seeing my family at Thanksgiving when I got the ticket. And then a month later, Christmas had already passed, it was New Year's, I thought the whole thing was behind me. I go to check my mailbox here, and I find a letter that basically says that my New York driver's license was being suspended due to failure to appear in court in another state because the stupid FedEx guy had delivered the package to the wrong part of the court, and it never got, and the fact that I had paid the ticket never got recorded, so they thought I just didn't show up to court and was ignoring the whole thing.
How did they figure that out? How did they figure out what happened?
I figured out what happened. This is just my hypothesis about what happened. So I was like, well, so they were basically you have until January 15th or whatever to show up at a New York DMV to turn in your driver's license for suspension, or a warrant will be issued for your arrest. And I was like, excuse me here, what the hell? So I spend literally the next 2 weeks playing phone tag with different people in different states, calling Albany, and Albany telling me that they can't do anything because they were given this information from the Department of Motor Vehicles in Kentucky, and that their hands were tied and that they were required ostensibly to prosecute because I didn't show up in court. And then I called the DMV in Kentucky, and they were like, well, we're just going by what the courthouse tells us. The courthouse tells us you skipped your court date. And I'm like, oh, I have the proof right here that I mailed the ticket back in. Then I call the courthouse, and the courthouse is like, well, we have no record of that. And that's where I kind of got the idea that it got delivered to the wrong place. So basically, after all of this back and forth, when I finally got a person on the phone at the courthouse, in the county where I got the ticket, I basically ended up having to have her reset me another court date that was far enough in the future that I could just go right on and pay online, and then put a stop payment, then go back to the post office and put a stop payment on the money order. And I still, once I paid the fine and settled the problem, still ended up on back and forth, like calling people in Albany and calling people in the Kentucky Department of Motor Vehicles to say, hey, please don't suspend my license. I paid this. And please don't arrest me because I'm trying to do the right thing and you're making it incredibly difficult for me. Like,
what a nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh, it was awful. And it was awful. And the thing that keeps getting me about it is that, like, if I had such an awful nightmare with that situation, and I'm coming from, like, for lack of a better term, a position of privilege, imagine how it would be if I didn't have the level of privilege that I have. Like,
yeah, and if they perceived you as like scary or angry or
yeah, if they had perceived me as scary or angry, well, like, first of all, if I was even, like, you know, not a little white girl to begin with when I got the ticket, but second of all, that, like, you know, especially calling people, especially having to call and reason with people in the South, that, for lack of a better term, that I sounded white on the phone. You know what
Definitely.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or that, like, even that, like, the language I used to complain was showing that I came from an educated background. I feel like that, like, if I wasn't even as articulate as I was at expressing my frustration, that I wouldn't have gotten good treatment to get it fixed. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, because they'll use any excuse to not give you a break, and someone who does not who might be less articulate than someone else, they would just assume is stupid and can be pushed around.
Exactly. And I mean, it's not like that I condone, like, cursing the DMV guy out or something, but, like,
oh, I do.
Even, like, well, but just, like, even, like, the level of vocabulary that I might have been using on, like, subconsciously to explain the situation may have been privilege that somebody else in my position might not have been privy to.
Yeah.
Simply from like growing up in a family of academics. And it makes me think, if I, like, you know, a white upper middle class woman who grew up, like, in a family of professors, am having to go through this massive amount of bullshit, I shudder to think about how somebody who, I guess to use the baseball analogy, wasn't born on second base, would be dealing with this.
Even people, with mental, non-neurotypical people, like the police have, killed, people on the autism spectrum all the time because they're not for help, and they ended up basically killing him because they didn't know how to deal with it.
Because they didn't know how to deal with, like, a non-neurotypical person. And I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And I mean, I'm a mess, but at least I can portray not being a mess.
Yeah, people who are more, like people who are, I guess, in some cases, nonverbal or don't respond well to being touched, like people on like you know, who are on the spectrum, like they might lash out, and a cop, you know, at that point, you know, like there have been times when a cop at that point has just basically like, you know, freaked out as they often do and just shot them.
Yeah, for sure.
No, it's so true. Like, you know.
Are we frozen right now?
No, you're frozen.
You had froze up.
Shit. That's
but
weird.
Like, no, you're totally right. Like, I feel like, or even somebody who doesn't like necessarily understand like the social cues of how you're supposed to react to specific, I want to say everyday situations, but like they shouldn't be everyday situations, getting pulled over by the police.
Yeah.
But like basic situations of life, I guess. Like some people who are on the spectrum don't necessarily know how to respond to those, or how to respond, like the correct way, like the socially acceptable way of handling those kinds of things, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And police officers are not trained to like handle that, because they're not trained to handle anything properly.
Exactly, yeah. And in a lot of cases, they don't care, and that goes back to their training and to the fact that you know, they have the blue wall of silence that basically gives them impunity to just you know, kill if, like, you know, they like notice a fly in their coffee or something. I mean, they're just you know, they don't care about anyone.
And I mean, here's what gets to me about it, is that I feel like that, like, look, like when I was in education school, like I had to take courses on dealing with students with disabilities. Like I had to take like cultural awareness workshops, things like that, in order to be in a position where I was facing and dealing with the public. But police officers aren't getting that kind of training.
I mean, I think I've read that in some cases they have received that training. It just doesn't necessarily make a difference, because
Yeah, 1 second.
It goes in.
It doesn't necessarily. Yeah, I
goes
mean, they
in
don't
one
care.
ear and out the other.
Yeah, they don't care a lot, and that's what police abolitionists are talking about, because there only is so much reform you can do, and the institution is rotten to the core, and we should actually have a conversation about how we could possibly restructure our society in such a way that most conflicts that would involve a police officer don't.
Well, yeah, because most of the time, like, I feel like that, like, conflicts that involved a police officer, as my students would say, it's because someone dragged it, yo.
Yeah.
Well,
or some Karen just called the cops for some stupid ass reason.
well, and that's the worst thing, is that, like, these damn, like, white women who think like the police are their own personal enforcement squad. Like, no, lady, they're not there to, like, for you to call them whenever you feel uncomfortable,
Yeah.
because someone's in your personal space, like, or someone tells you to do something that you don't want to do. Like, no, go fuck yourself. I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, I was reading a story about, like, about some Karen who went into Starbucks to order a latte and wasn't wearing a mask, and the barista said, working the register, said, "I'm sorry, store policy, I can't like Starbucks corporate policy says I can't serve you if you don't have a mask. Like or it says that the only way I could serve you is if you don't have a mask is through the drive-through. So, and then she tried to pull like the fake like disability card, and the barista again said, you know, you can order ahead and just come in and pick it up and leave. You can go through the drive-through. Like, he offered her options, and instead the dumb bitch, instead of like, you know, putting on a mask or just going back out to her car and getting in the drive-through because it's not that fucking serious, the dumb bitch like called the cops on the barista telling her to wear a mask. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you, lady? You don't take that out on the poor kid. The poor kid's just like, look, I worked for Starbucks for 7 years. Like, I know how they operate. Like, if he's telling you to put on a fucking mask, it's because he's just following company policy. Like, there were explicit like trainings on how to handle different things. And
that's
now
the thing.
This is one of them.
That's the thing. That's the fucked up thing about upper middle class people in general. I mean, it's racist. It's also classist. They just who like works as a cashier, and they just think that they're better than them just inherently, and that anytime someone, you know, from this locally, you know, deserve called on them because because they're just the most fucked up, entitled, sociopathic people on the planet. It's just I detest so.
Well, and I gotta say, like, you know, there were times when I nearly lost my crap on customers because they were coming in and like treating me like ordering me around and talking to me in the same way that they would talk to their dogs, basically, under the assumption that like I was just my intention, or that my place in life was just there to serve them. And there were some times when I felt like, and the only thing that kept me from doing this was that I did not want to get fired. But there were times when I just wanted to be like, listen, lady, I went to college. Guess what? Guess who paid for me to go to 4 years of college? My family. I graduated. I have a degree. But you guys have like totally fucked up the economy for us so badly that college educated people are having to get jobs that you consider to be like beneath you.
But see, even saying that concedes the premise to them that somehow a college education is what entitles you to be treated with dignity. Like a high school graduate, a high school dropout does not deserve to be talked to that way because everyone,
no human does.
No human does, and that's it's just really. It's just really disgusting that you know, rich people and anyone serves that way. So, you know, it's more like, it's not like, oh, I got a college degree but the economy was fucked up. It's more like, you know what, just go fuck yourself. And that's the thing. If we had stronger unions in this country, you would be able to tell a customer to go fuck themselves. I mean, you should be able to. Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem with customer service too, is that the reason is that Karens have been kind of like emboldened because of the of everybody's "the customer is always right" policy.
I've always hated that
Yeah.
saying. Customers are not always right.
Yeah.
But you know what? Whatever, 99.9% of the time, when a customer says the customer is always right, the customer is wrong, you dumb fuck.
I actually have a Starbucks story that happened today.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I wasn't even going to grab a cup of coffee on my way to work, but I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to treat myself. So I went into Starbucks, like a few blocks from work. This is after walking like an hour, so it's not like I can go back home. I order my coffee. I'm looking through my bag. I'm like, oh, fuck. I don't have my wallet with me. How am I going to pay for this? And I told him to stop the order, but I guess he didn't. And I kept looking for my wallet. I'm like, oh my God, do you take any other form of payment? He was like, yeah, do you have like Samsung Pay? Do you have the Starbucks app? And like to add your card to any of them, you kind of like need your card to have your number. And I didn't. So I tried to link my PayPal, but the app's like, oh, you have to call PayPal to verify. I'm like, fuck, I don't have my fucking wallet. How am I going to get through the day?
I hate it when that kind of thing happens.
And then the guy handed me a drink. He's like, oh, are you done? I'm like, oh, no, I'm still working on this. I just have to add like my card. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to need you to like step to the side, blah, blah, blah. So I'm standing there for like several minutes. And like another barista was like, oh, is everything okay? Yeah, you can take the drink and just, pay the next time you come in. I'm like, are you sure? Like, I'm almost done setting this up. I think he just wanted me to get the fuck out because like you're not supposed to have
social
in-store dining. Yeah. So like at the end I was like, shit, I guess I should just take it. But that was so nice of them to give me a drink for free and like to trust that I'll come back and actually pay for it. I'm like, oh my God, I've never had that happen to me before. It was very heartwarming.
I mean, we would be allowed to do that, like, especially if it was a regular customer or somebody that we thought would come back.
Yeah, I'm not a regular. That's the thing. But yeah, I guess he assumed that. I mean, he assumed right. I'm obviously gonna go back. I was like, I'll be back on Monday. And great employees.
That's the thing. Is like he assumed the best. Yeah. Like, but the thing is that like he also could probably tell because you were being like apologetic and polite and being like. And not being like, well, I expect to get a drink just without paying for it because I forgot my wallet and I'm not going home to get it. Like,
you've encountered customers like that entitled?
Yeah, like.
Oh my God. That's
like they think they're entitled to like whatever. Oh yeah, that was awful. But like. But like, I've encountered customers who have basically tried like whatever to get a free drink. Like they'll say that like there was a fly in their coffee that they came in to pick up last Thursday at 11:37 a.m. And I'll just be like, excuse me. But then they would like tell you that, like at the time, I don't know if this is still the policy because I haven't worked there in 6 years.
Yeah.
But at the time, like they would tell us, oh, just give them the free drink to just get them the fuck out of the store.
What if they do that every day?
That's the problem. If they do that, that's what we complained about because I don't think. Yeah, exactly. If you give a mouse a cookie, then he's gonna want some milk. Like after a while, I think that they probably aren't likely to do that with like any old like stupid Karen anymore because people are just like, because the employees just got fed up because we basically just had to like stand there and suck it up and take it from like customers being abusive. And that's the thing, like they like honestly like they were probably more than willing to like give you the drink for free because you weren't being an ass about it.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say the same thing. It's so rare they actually get a customer that treats them like a human being. They almost want to do something extra nice for them. I mean, it's sad that just being a decent person, which is what everyone should be, is like a rare occurrence for them.
Mm-hmm. That's so sad to hear. But if I wanted to, if I go in on Monday and the employees are there, how do I tip them to make sure that they get the tip? Because I think there's an option on the Starbucks app if you tip, but I feel like that goes straight to Starbucks because they wouldn't know who's working during that time, right?
Well, what happens?
Yeah, exactly, and Howard Schultz doesn't need any more of our money.
Well, no, the money doesn't go to Howard Schultz. Like, it actually does go to the baristas, but there's like a mathematical formula when you tip, like, where like each barista in the store gets like, where they take like, let's say if you get, I used to be the person who divided up tips.
Mm-hmm.
before I became a supervisor, and they decided that supervisors shouldn't handle tips because people sued. But
yes, I have a problem with my order that I just got from you guys.
Well, I'm not going to mute him because this is relevant.
Oh, a problem with my order that I just got.
Let's judge him. Score him from 1 to 10.
337.
This is perfect.
44th Street.
I thought this was just him playing a character for a second.
They put the carrot cake on the bottom, and the whole plastic box is broken. Like the plastic is broken. It's like the plastic is like in the like on the cake. The plastic containers.
Flav, your inner Karen is showing.
No, he's being very nice about it.
Yeah,
so far.
That's true. He's being a lot politer.
Let's see if they're willing to work with him and see if it escalates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I think that went well.
Oh my God, I'm crying.
Flav, can you hear us?
I don't think so.
Flav.
All right. When he returns, we'll address it. But so how do I tip these people through the app? Or do I just do cash in the little tip jar?
I mean, I would say just to do cash in the little tip jar, because then it's more likely that it'll actually get to them because there aren't like extra steps in the middle.
Yeah. I just don't want anyone like taking the tip money because you know how people can do that.
I mean, on the other hand, now like I'm pretty sure that like if you tip on the app, like the cash registers. See, because I used to have to like do a payout procedure on the cash registers. For like, and there was a code I would put in for like whatever was tipped. Like it would tell me what was tipped in the app, and I would have to like put a code in to pull it out of the cash register in cash and lock it up. But
so it would know who's working during that time when I ordered the drink,
or it would give them like it would give them extra money because it's divided up by the amount of hours that they worked. So if they work there every morning, they'll get more money than the person who was only there like for 3 hours on Sunday afternoon.
Wait, so you're saying that the tip that did... Hold on, Flav is back. Flav.
Yeah.
Are they giving you a new carrot cake?
I don't know. I guess like maybe tomorrow or something.
Oh my God. Are you still gonna eat the carrot cake?
I don't know. I mean, it's probably. I don't know.
I'll take it. Carrot cake's delicious.
What happened?
No, it's just like the containers, like the plastic's all like crushed into the, crushed in like on top of
Ooh,
the
that's
cake. Like I don't know how that happens. I've never
sounds like a
seen a
choking
box
hazard.
Yeah, I just don't understand how that happens. It's got to
But
be like
Emily,
really weak.
so all tips through the app are divvied up amongst every employee within Starbucks? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but so are the cash tips.
Are you no, I'm saying like everyone, even if it's not their shift, it's divvied up between everybody.
Well, like the way they do it is that they add up like all of the tips for a given week. Like let's say that like this week like was like
that sucks.
let's say this week was like $150 in tips. Like like you would divide 150 by like the number of hours worked by everybody in the store overall to get like an hourly rate, and then it would be dependent. So let's say that like tips were like, and this was lousy when this was the case, but let's say that like the hourly, like the amount of tips that were given, that the hourly rate was like 15 cents an hour.
Oh Jesus!
Then like
okay.
Normally it's much more than that.
Okay.
But like, let's say that like Joe Schmo worked like a full 40 hours that week. Like Joe Schmo would get $6, which is 15 cents times 40. But Jane Schmo only worked 20 hours. Jane Schmo would only get half of the tips. So basically it's like left as like a function of like the more hours you work in the week, the more of the tip pool is yours.
Hey, so
I was hoping they did it at the end of every shift.
Yeah, and I know. I wish they did too, but I guess that was too complicated for their computer brains to figure out.
Hey, so
it would be easier.
I have a question / issue with this order, since I guess everyone can hear me on the phone, like with my headphones being out. So now I'm seeing where it looks like the frosting from the cake looks like that's like on the outside of the bag there, and on the inside of the bag there. I think that's kind of weird. Like,
yeah,
they
like
probably
maybe
touched the frosting with their hand when they're packing your stuff, and it got on the bag. Not that they smeared the actual cake that they gave you on the bag.
Yeah.
Or that the cake was just bouncing around in the bag and the frosting got out of the container.
Yeah.
No, this bag has been like
To hell and back.
No, it's been stapled close.
Oh, you're saying there's frosting on the outside of the bag?
On the outside and the inside.
I think it's just from them handling it and then packing your food.
Yeah, I could see
you're
that.
Probably right.
I could see that. Maybe that's why it's. Yeah, I guess it couldn't be on the inside if it was just the guy handling the bag. The delivery
What'd
guy.
you order though?
It's from this place called Ginger or something. What's it called? Ginger House. It's like a vegan. Like.
Are they a chain? Vegan. I feel like they have one on the Lower East Side.
I don't know. I don't know if they are. It's possible.
I mean, there might be like 2 of them, but that's hardly a chain.
It's just reminded me that
sound like a robot.
really hungry, so I think I'm gonna call it a night. But this has been fun. Do I sound like a robot?
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you did.
I think I might call it a night too.
Okay.
I have to get over all my laughing that I just did.
Okay. All right, it's been a good night.
Yeah.
I'll see everybody.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Good night.
Nice to meet you. Bye. Until next time, fight the power.